Good morning. Glad to be here this morning. We're glad that you're here this morning. Congratulations to Gary and Melody. How's that work, 40th anniversary, and you're only 39, Melody? I don't know, but congratulations. We congratulate them. We're glad that you're here, and it's always good to be in the Lord's house to worship together this morning. Before we get into this morning's message, I want to go ahead and share with you. Next Sunday morning, we're going to be celebrating the Lord's Supper, observing communion as a part of our service. As a result of that, I'm going to ask you to do something you hadn't done in 137 years. Change where you're sitting. We're going to ask everybody to sit in the middle section next week. It will make it much easier in serving the communion. It will help us to meet new friends and be in a new environment. So you remember that as you come in next Sunday morning, and the ushers will be helping you with that. This morning we're going to continue our study that God has a plan. And what a beautiful song selection for just before our message this morning. Not only was that a beautiful song, it's beautiful prayer. That God would keep us in His will so we won't be in His way. God is always at work in our lives. God has a plan for each of our lives. We know that is true. And knowing that is true, why then does it feel like sometimes our lives are simply falling apart? If we're doing God's will and God is working out His plan in our lives, it seems to us that everything should just go smoothly and organized and without interruption. But so many times we find in our lives events happening that we don't understand. Have you ever paused to look back over your life and think to yourself, Lord, how did I get here? God has a plan. A thought came to me this week as I was studying again this text for the message this morning. And I thought of my own life, and I thought, Lord, how in the world did I get here? To be blessed to do what I do. How did I get from where I was to where I am, and ultimately to where I'm going? Isn't it utterly amazing what God does in the lives of His children? And He doesn't do it because of us, but sometimes in spite of us. And I think we find that true in the life of Joseph. This morning we're going to begin reading in Genesis chapter 37 in verse 12 and read the remainder of the chapter. The title of our message this morning, the theme is God has a plan. And this morning's message is that He has a plan to get us to the place where He plans to use us. Beginning in verse 12 of chapter 37, the book of Genesis. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel, or Jacob, said to Joseph, Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, Here I am. Then he said to him, Please go and see if it is well with your brothers, and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out to the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him. There he was, wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What are you seeking? So he said, I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, They have departed from here, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, Look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, Some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it and delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him. Reuben said to them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers, and they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. They sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes, and looked, there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. And he remembered his brothers had said, The lad is no more, and I, where shall I go? So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, dipped the tunic in the blood, and they sent the tunic of many colors that they bought to their fathers and said, We have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not? And he recognized it and said, It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned his son many days. And all his sons and his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, For I shall go down into my grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word. Just as a reminder to bring us to the point where we are, Jacob had 12 sons by 2 wives and 2 servants. His favored son was Joseph. We were told last week in the scripture that he loved him more than any of the others. He made for him a special coat, a coat of many colors, as we learn in Sunday school or Bible school. And we remember the story of the coat of many colors. Joseph has some dreams. One where he is elevated, that was symbolic of him being elevated above his brothers. Another that saw him elevated above his father and mother and his brothers. They hated him because he was favored. They hated him because the father loved him more. They hated him because of his tunic of many colors. They hated him because he was the chosen one. They hated him because of his dreams and all that was taking place. They just wanted rid of Joseph. We come to the text today. The brothers have taken the flocks and herds. They have traveled some 50 miles to this place where there was good grass and water for them to be nourished, and they were there a while, and then unknown to Jacob and to Joseph, they had traveled on to another place. And Jacob sends his son Joseph to go and find out what's going on with his brothers. I don't know about you, but I kind of think if I'd been the one that Jacob was asking, go check on your brothers, I'd say, do you know those 11 guys, they really hate me? They don't like me. They don't want me around. They want rid of me. And you want me to go out in the wilderness to find them and find what's going on in their lives? That's not what Joseph does. When the text is introduced that we read this morning, when Jacob calls his son Joseph, and he says, I'm going to send you to Shechem. Come and I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. To do his father's bidding, whatever it was. He said, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him to the valley of Hebron. Should Joseph even care if it is well with his brothers or well with their flocks? But nevertheless, as the good son, the chosen son, he was available to do his father's bidding. A 50-mile journey today is not that much. An hour, we can be there. 50 miles in the day of Joseph is several days' journey. He travels and he comes to the place where the area where they're supposed to be. He begins to search and to look for them. Is unable to find them. He encounters a man there and he says, I'm looking for my brothers. Would you know where they are? And he said, yes, they've gone to this certain place. There you will find them. It's another 15 miles. Probably 2 days more of travel for Joseph. And as he's going, he's making his way there. Can't you imagine as he traveled day after day in search of his brothers to obtain a report and bring it back to their fathers? He's thinking, what are they going to do? How will they react? What will they do to me? What am I going to find when I get there? He knew they didn't like him. He knew that they were going to do something that was not good. But who could ever imagine that there was enough hatred in their heart to take their brother's life? I grew up with a brother 15 months older than me. And brothers are what they are. And I've been mad at him for a lot of things and over a lot of years growing up. I've never been angry enough to even ponder, to even entertain a thought of taking a life of a brother. But these brothers, probably the only thing they agreed on was their hatred of Joseph. None of them liked him. And as Joseph is making his way there, they observe him coming a good ways off. Verse 18, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of this dreamer. We shall see what will become of this dreamer. Prophetic words, more prophetic than they could ever imagine. Why? Because God had a plan. Have you become what you dreamed you would be when you were a young boy or a girl growing up? Guys, how many of us were going to play in the major leagues? I don't know what girls dream of. I've never been a girl, so I have no idea. They're going to be a princess. We have these dreams. What are we going to become? What's going to take place in our lives? Here he comes. Can you imagine a discussion? Who brings up the idea of killing their brother? How do you even have that discussion? There's so much here that it's just so hard for us to wrap our minds around. They saw him coming afar off, and before he even got there, they had already decided what they would do. Why is this hatred so great in their hearts toward their brother? Now, we don't know this. This is just my mind wandering. Because of the dreams, the discussion that they had had, can't you imagine as they're there in the fields day after day, tending their flocks, caring for them, as they're talking together as brothers, would not the topic of the dreams and the favored son, I mean, after all, we're out here in the field working for our Father, and He's back home. Talking about that dream. Talking about Him being superior over us. Talking about Him being in an elevated position. Now the day has come. Here comes the brother. Here comes Joseph. What are we going to do? They had conspired against him. Look, the dreamer is coming. Let us now kill him and cast him in some pit. We shall say some wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him in a pit, which is in the wilderness. And do not lay a hand on him, that we might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to her father. Why does Reuben intervene? Reuben is the eldest son. He is the one that is responsible for all the other brothers. When word comes back to the father, who is the one to give accountability? It's Reuben. Reuben is trying to appease the brothers and satisfy his father. His father wanted most for his son Joseph to come back well and healthy. The brothers wanted most to destroy him. And Reuben's responsibility was to do the right thing. So he says to the brothers, he said, let us not kill him. That's not right. Let us cast him into a pit. He's saying all this that he might bring him back to his father, knowing that he was facing accountability. So this is the proposal that he makes. Let's cast him into the pit. So it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. They took him and cast him into a pit. The pit was empty and there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. They took their brother, they stripped him of his clothes, they cast him into a dry, empty pit, and they sat down to a meal. And we say, how could they? They were celebrating a task well done. They have rid themselves of the beloved Joseph, the favored one, the dreamer. They sat down to a meal. As they sat and ate, they looked, and here comes a company of Ishmaelites, descendants of Abraham. They traveled from place to place, taking product of one land to another place to sell it. And they're going to Egypt to sell. They would buy anything and sell anything. And as they're sitting there, and they saw the Ishmaelites coming. So Judah, in verse 26, so Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. Judah said, "I have a plan. It's not right that we would take his life. Instead, let's make a little profit. We will sell him to these traders," literally selling him into slavery. They can take him to Egypt and dispose of him there. We'll be rid of Joseph. We'll not be guilty of murder. And life goes on without the dreamer. So they sell him, they pull Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. But then Reuben returns in verse 29. And Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes, and he returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is no more, and I, where shall I go?" He thought he was surprising his brothers with some news. "I went to the pit and Joseph is not there. He's gone. I don't know where he is. I don't know what I'll do. Where shall I go? What shall I do?" So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, dipped the tunic in blood, and they sent the tunic of many colors that they brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" And the father said, "Duh. Really? You don't recognize that? Sure, it's my son's tunic." No doubt he's been attacked by a wild animal. He's been killed, and my son is no more. And they would let their father grieve and worry. He would not be comforted. All this is taking place. His fathers wept for him, and the Midianites took him and sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, the officer of the Pharaoh. These guys were something else, weren't they? That they would do this to their father. How could this possibly be God's plan? They were not worried about serving God or pleasing God or doing God's will. But God works in our lives in spite of our sin. What was taking place? What was about to happen? Is God using sinful behavior to work out His will? No. God is using the lives of sinful people in spite of what they do. God has a plan. When we look back and reflect, the many twists and turns and obstacles and things that have happened in our lives, how could God use that? God works in mysterious ways. It's not the journey that is so miraculous. It is the destination. God has a plan. God is working in each of our lives to accomplish a plan. Sometimes when life feels like it's falling apart, just remind ourselves, He is not finished yet. Why am I here? How did I get here? What is the purpose? And God says, wait, I'm not finished yet. When we cry and when we pray and when we wonder and when we worry and we say, God, I don't understand. And He says, wait, I'm not finished yet. Wait till you see the end. Don't doubt God. Don't leave God. God cares for us and loves us. How many of Jacob's sons did God love? All of them, in spite of their sin, in spite of their nature, in spite of their actions, God loves us. This is not a license to sin. It's not a license for us to live opposed to God. But it's a reminder that even when we miss the mark, even when we fail, even when our lives are falling apart, God still loves us. And He's taking care of us. God has a plan to get us where He wants to use us in our lives. Father, thank You for Your work in our lives. Thank You for Your work in the lives of the brothers of Joseph, the sons of Jacob, that in spite of who they were, in spite of what they did, You would use their rebellion. You would use their plotting and planning against their brother to get Joseph where you planned to use him to do things that no one could ever imagine. Remind us that when it feels like our life is falling apart, you've not forsaken us, you've not forgotten us, you've not failed us. You're just not finished yet. Father, I pray for those that are here today. Maybe there's someone here today and feel like their life is just falling apart. And so many things we don't understand. Use this text to remind us